Tinderholt. He's a state representative in our Texas House. And he's decided that he is going to run for Speaker of the Texas House, which is a big job. And thus far, he is the only candidate challenging the current Speaker, Dave Phelan. So I'd like to say for the record, if there are other people who are planning to run, and I heard a little birdie tell me this morning there might be another candidate, they are welcome to sit for an interview, as is Dave Phelan, who has been invited and has not yet accepted the invitation. So Tony, thank you for being here, and I thank my colleagues also for being willing to work with us and to ask questions. So we're going to start, and we're going to start with Ms. Glover, and she's going to introduce herself for those who do not have the pleasure of knowing Jill Glover, and we'll go down the line. And so Jill, after you introduce yourself, just go ahead and ask your question. And Andy, when you ask your first question, introduce yourself, and on down the line. So thank you.
I am Jill Glover, the State Republican Executive Committee woman for Senate District 12 and the chair of the Legislative Priorities Committee for the Republican Party of Texas. Representative Tinderholt, thank you so much for being here. My very first question for you today is, why have you decided to run for Speaker?
You know, that's a big question that I've gotten asked quite a bit over the last 10 to 12 days. I think the things that you go through in life prepare you for something, right? As a Christian, you get prepared to do something, and you don't always know what it is. You're not always sure what it is. And I'm convinced this is one of those things, is I'm at the right place at the right time to try to restore liberty and freedom in Austin and what we do. The current speaker, I tell people that I think he's a fine man. I've met him, talked to him several times. I watch him with his children. My wife knows his wife. And I'm able to differentiate. There's a difference between the political/professional individual and the individual on a personal basis. So while I like him and I respect him, I do not like the job that he's doing for Republicans. As a Republican member of the Texas House and then becoming Speaker, I think that the speakership should not be a powerful position. I feel like the Speaker should be a servant to 149 other members. So if you look at 205,000 people that I represent, I work for them. I'm here, not here. The Speaker is under those 149 members and should be a servant to them. And what I feel like has happened since I've been in the Texas House, and probably even longer, is that the speakership is a powerful position where people are held to a certain standard of doing what the speaker wants all of the time. And I also am not happy that we have a Republican speaker who caters to Democrats. I think that that's not healthy. It's obviously not what the Texans want. I mean, if you look at Proposition 6, they were pretty specific. I think it was about 81% don't want the minority party having chairs. And by the way, when they said they don't want it, that means if Democrats were in control, that the same would happen. And so there's so many more reasons, but those are the big ones. I think it's time to have a speaker that wants to lead and be a servant to the people and talk and push the Republican priorities instead of waiting until the last week of session and then trying to squeeze them in and water them down and get them passed and call them victories.
Good afternoon, Representative Tinderholt. My name is Andy Hopper. I'm co-founder of Wise County Conservatives. So first question is, it is said that historically the Texas Speaker was not the coveted position that it is today. Can you quickly enumerate the primary ways that power in the Texas House is centralized in the Speaker?
So I want to touch on the first part. I've often said that the speakership should be the least coveted position in the Texas House, and I really believe that. The reason I think it should be the least coveted position is if you look at it from a personal standpoint, there's no pay raise, but there's a huge responsibility that comes with it. And the amount of hours and time that the speaker puts in are innumerable. But the power has been consolidated in that speakership where the speaker literally owns everything that happens. The speaker has parliamentarians right now that were worked with Democrats in the past. That's very telling. The speaker can punish people. I've been talking to a lot of members. I'm halfway through the list of calling all the Republicans, and I should be done in the very near future talking to all of them, or at least making contact. And as I talk to them, I hear the same message. On the Democrat chair vote, if I vote against the Democrat chair rule change, I will be punished, I will lose leadership, and I will not pass bills. That is not the power that a speaker should have. If there's any power in the speakership, it should be the power to enforce the rules in that rule book that we have on the House floor. It should be the power to make sure that all 149 members, regardless of the party that they affiliate with, is held accountable to the rules in that book and everything that the speaker is responsible for. But I don't believe that the speaker should dictate punishments for people and accountability for people. Last time I checked, I'm accountable to about 205,000 people in my district, as are 149 other members. And it's about time that the Speaker of the Texas House starts respecting the fact that individual state reps represent 205,000 about people in the district, and they don't do what they're told by the Speaker of the House.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tinderholt, again for being here. So let's get to some of the rules that are in the Republican Party platform that are important to the grassroots. And let's talk about Rule 44. Do you support Rule 44? And do you support it across the board for all Republican officials?
Make sure that I know what Rule 44 is. I've been going through the platform inside and out lately, and one of the discussions that comes up is 233, and I want to talk about that at some point, but remind me of what 44 is.
Rule 44 is what we call the censure rule.
Oh.
If you, and I'm not going to give you the reads on
Nope.
it, but you get what I'm asking.
And I believe they changed it to where there needs to be 3 issues, but I agree with that. I think that as a member of a political party, that you should have accountability to your voters and your party. And if you don't want to be held accountable, then run as an independent. But as a Republican, if I do things, this is me, this is just personally me, if I do things that are not in good order and conscience with the party that I'm affiliated with, the Republican Party, then I believe people should be censured. And the reason I don't worry about that is I do the things that are right. And if people are doing the right thing, they're not going to get censured. People make mistakes. I was talking to someone a little bit ago today saying that, hey, I feel like I vote right all the time. And then I had to go back and say most of the time, because we all make mistakes. And then we find out later that there was something in a bill, and we go make a statement, and we have to be able to defend that. And that's okay to make mistakes. But what's not okay is not pushing the party platform and not working through it and trying to, do the will of the voters, the people that elected you. We owe it to them. We're servants. And I want to say something that I've talked about a lot since I've been a state rep. I spent 21 years in the military, and I watched other nations be able to go vote and do the things that we take for granted. I think that people get lost in the fact that voters vote for us. The Republican Party platform is created by another group of people, and we go execute that platform. We also don't grant or take away rights. We protect inalienable rights. And that's our job. Our job is to go to Austin. We don't create the platform. We execute the platform. And so the short answer is yes, I agree 100% with that rule. I think people need to be held accountable.
Thank you.
Howdy, I'm Tom Glass. I wear a lot of hats as I go through my political life, but the two I think that are most interesting and important for this organization is I run a group called Texas Legislative Priorities, which focuses on making sure that the legislative priorities get passed during the session. And I run a group called Texas Constitutional Enforcement, which is trying to get our elected officials to adhere to the Constitution and protect the rights of Texans that are protected under the Constitution. My first question is, it's a process question, just to kind of understand as we watch this process. The de facto process for picking the speaker has been different over time. How do you see the process playing out this time? Does the Republican caucus still have a rule to pick the caucus in caucus and then support it at the legislature? And do you think that will be honored this time? And how do you think the large freshman class that's coming in factor into all of this?
You know, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked it because I was one of the 5 members that helped create that rule. The intent behind the rule is pretty simple. Historically, speakers would go garner Democrat support and add on some Republicans, or they would get a huge amount of Democrats to support them. And they might not talk to some of the Republicans or none of them. And so it was intended to decrease the influence that Democrats had when Republicans have control of the House. And it was a good rule. And grassroots loved it. It's actually Plank 233. And I think it's a 233A maybe, but when you look at that rule, since we created it about 5 years ago, 2 speakers have bypassed that rule, the intent of the rule. The rule essentially is that we go into caucus in December after the November elections, and we do a secret ballot. And on that secret ballot, the winner that leaves the room, everyone in the caucus has pledged through that rule that they will vote for the individual that won the secret ballot. So if there's 2 people and one gets 60%, one gets 40%, everyone that was on the 40% team is now on the 60% team as a group. Dennis Bonnen and Dade Phelan both bypassed it. I'll just use the example of Dade Phelan. November 4th of 2020, Dade Phelan came out the day after the election, November elections, November 4th. Basically said the speaker's race is over essentially. I have the votes and I will be the speaker. In my mind, he bypassed that rule. Now, I have members, as I'm talking, I will not use names, but I'll tell you, I'm talking to several members, and they're basically saying, if you refuse to abide by that rule, I will not and cannot vote for you. I disagree, and I think the grassroots would agree with me that it's been bypassed, and I refuse to follow a rule that I helped create that's been bypassed every other time. And now, because it's a rule of convenience, they get to say no to me as Speaker of the House so that they can vote for the individual that will kill Republican priorities, will cater to the Democrats. I refuse to allow that. And so I'm not going to. I will tell you today, here and now, that I intend to take the vote to the floor. 150 members are going to have to choose who they want for Speaker. They will have to choose, if there's 2 candidates, a red or a green button, and it'll be Representative Tinderholt or Dade Phelan. And they're going to have to do it out in the open, where the voters expect us. They expect that we do things transparent and open, not behind closed doors. So I'm saying it here today. I helped create the rule, and some of my very close friends helped craft that rule even more than I did. And they want me to follow the rule, and I'm not going to follow it. And I know this is a job interview, and that may or may not be something you want to hear. But I think it is absolutely preposterous to think that because it's convenient today, that Representative Tinderholt should follow that rule today, when it hasn't been followed since we've had it. I think it's just insane. I think it needs to be changed, to be honest.
Representative Tinderholt, also in that rule, I think there are 3 parts, or perhaps not the rule, but the plank 233. There's a Part B and a Part C that talk about the speakers shall support the legislative priorities of the Republican Party of Texas. How have Republican representatives historically regarded the RPT legislative priorities, and how would you rate their current commitment to passing legislation for these priorities?
Historically speaking, the legislative priorities are run by the Speaker of the House. Whatever is decided will pass, will pass. If they decide that it will pass watered down, it will pass that way. Sometimes there are liberty-minded people that are courageous and they will add and do amendments to those bills to try to make them better. But oftentimes in the 8 years that I've been in that building, 4 sessions, the will of the Republican Party platform is not followed. And I pledge this: if I'm honored enough to become Speaker of the House, I will be a servant to 149 members, Democrat and Republican alike. If they need barriers removed to make their job more successful, if they need help with something, that is the job. But I'm also a Republican, and I believe in the platform. And my job would be to go talk to chairmen and chairwomen and discuss the platform and ask, how are these bills going? What's the status of them? Can we get them to the floor? That's the job of a Republican Speaker of the House. Now, the job of the Republican Speaker of the House is not to make mandates and dictate things. But it would be incumbent upon me to be checking on those and try to push those priorities through. That's our job. But sadly, I think sometimes, not all legislators, but some legislators feel like when we get to Austin that we're smarter than the voters and smarter than the RPT. And I just think everyone has their roles. The voters vote for us. They determine that we are the right people to go down and represent them. The priorities are given to us through a lengthy process, by the way. I got to go down to Houston, and I've watched it every session, but it's a lengthy process. And a lot of people spend a lot of time and resources to do it. And it's our job to listen, learn, and execute those. Our job isn't to create the priorities. They've already been created. Our job, we need to know our role. In 21 years in the military, I learned very quickly that you need to know your role. You need to be a good follower, to be a good leader. Well, knowing your role is just as important. And my role is to go to Austin and pass Republican priorities. That's it. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Representative. My second question is, committees are perhaps the primary way that speakers kill bills he doesn't want to see the light of day. What are the committees, why are committees such an opaque mechanism, and what changes would you support as Speaker to make committees fully transparent and committee members completely accountable to voters?
First and foremost, I want to be very clear. Speaker candidates are forbidden from saying who they will or will not appoint and whether they will or won't keep parliamentarians and who they will or won't have on their staff. But I'll just start with how the chairmanships work and what I would do. So the Speaker of the House will appoint chairmen and chairwomen to oversee the committees. The Speaker will then refer bills to specific committees. Now that's where problem number one, well, problem number one is appropriate or inappropriately making someone a chair, vice chair, or basically putting the wrong people in those positions. It could be wrong because they don't know anything about the topic. It could be wrong for so many reasons. But then most speakers will put people in those chairmanships that will do their bidding and their will. So you could put someone that is a Democrat in public safety to make sure that pro-gun legislation does not pass, right? But then the Speaker can also misrefer bills to the committees that he or she thinks will do their bidding and their will. And you'll see me at the back mic over the last 4 sessions requesting for bills to be re-referred, and you don't get recognized. So number one, they appoint the correct committee chairman for their well-being as the Speaker to remain in power. So as a Speaker, Dade Phelan right now has to assist the Democrats in some way. You partly do that through appointing chairmanships. You partly do it through misreferring bills. And eventually what happens is those bills can be heard. Now let me tell you a little secret. People will author bills and go home and tell them, I authored this bill. Never request a hearing. But if they request a hearing and the bill doesn't get heard, that's probably because one of a couple things happened. The Speaker didn't want it heard, or it's not a topic that the chairman or chairwoman wants to hear. It is so important who you appoint as chairman and chairwomen because they literally hold the cards for every bill. Let me tell you some rule changes I've tried almost every session. Every time a bill is heard in committee, I've tried to make it so that it shall get a vote out in the open. There should not be whipping votes. it shall 100% get a vote by all the members with a yay or a nay. That doesn't happen. They quietly whip votes, and then a bill might die because they're not going to have enough votes. That's wrong. Tagging bills, that needs to change. Tagging bills in calendars. I don't want to go into a whole lot of depth about how the calendars work, but eventually they leave the committee and they go to a calendars committee. One is kind of like bills that everyone should agree on, and one is bills that are going to need some discussion on the floor. In those calendars committees, the voters might be disappointingly surprised that an individual that might not like Tony Tinderholt can say tag all of his bills. That bill never gets voted on. And it can be because I skipped dinner with somebody and it made them mad. It can be because I killed somebody's bill. That bill sits in calendars committee and goes nowhere. So I've tried to get rules where there is absolutely no tagging allowed. And that in those calendars committees, every single bill shall get a vote with an A or an A, with a name attached to it, just like in the other regular committees. Those both get shot down by Republicans, and it just doesn't pass the common sense test. So chairmanships are important. How you refer bills is important, and rule changes are necessary to clean that up. There's so many things that you'll see on the third day of session that are going to surprise you if you watch. If you've never watched the rules debate, I encourage people out there watching right now, or that watch the recorded version of this, I encourage them to watch that day, because you're going to see your legislators. Some are going to make you so happy. Some are going to be very disappointing. It's really an interesting day. It's even more interesting than the day where people vote for speaker, to be honest. Because the day that the rules vote happens, you're going to see some chaotic votes, and you're going to see some very interesting votes where people that you love do the wrong thing, and some people are going to surprise you. You might not have much respect for them as a voter, and you're going to see them do some pretty amazing things that day too. It's a long answer. I apologize. Yes, sir.
Representative Tinderholt, we are well acquainted with all the excuse making as to why bills can't move along faster. In fact, I like to say the excuses are legion, and that has every meaning that you could imagine attached to it, that statement. It's against the people. And so I'm going to ask you about a new one and ask you your depth of understanding of it and how you would remedy the situation. As you know, the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker are the bosses, if you will, of the Ledge Council. So explain to us the Ledge Council's role in moving legislation along the process, and if you were aware of any things that could be done to improve that process.
I'm going to give you a simple answer. I'm going to give you the most simple answer that you're not expecting. The governor knows what he wants. The governor knows, whether it's priorities or not. The governor knows. Now, the RPT told us what we needed to do. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. The Senate, within the first 30 days, will probably push all 8 priorities over to the Senate, because the lieutenant governor knows what the people want. He knows what the RPT came out with. And they're going to push really good bills over to the House. They always do. And then the House is going to sit on their hands. And they're going to kill most or all of them or water them down, right? That's what's going to happen. So regardless of what the Ledge Council does, everyone operates semi-independently, and they want to pretend that they have this council that does all this coordinating and all this decision-making. But what really happens is the governor is going to push his priorities. The lieutenant governor traditionally is going to push the priorities, which is what we should expect. I'm being very general. And the House is going to hold. And the House is going to hold because every time that I've been in the Texas House, the Republican Speaker of the House is beholden to the Democrats. And that person is beholden to the Democrats because they become the Speaker with Democrat votes. And so all of those priorities that are super important to the people of Texas, the Republican voters, are going to die in the Texas House. or they're going to be used to barter to make liberal things happen to bills, or liberal things happen so that the Speaker can turn to the Democrats and say, look what I did for you. I will give you an example. Democrats left last session. This is the power the Speaker currently has. Democrats leave last session. I think Dade Phelan will remember the discussion I had with him in his office about 2 hours before the Democrats left. I went to him and said, they're leaving. We have to do a call of the House. He said, I have this. I got control. He didn't. They left. They left the state of Texas. They stole $221 a day. $221 a day of taxpayer per diem. You paid for it. At 12 days, it exceeds $2,500, which last time I checked, exceeds the amount for a felony. Yet Dade Phelan, because he's beholden to the Democrats and he uses them to get elected, was reluctant to do a call of the House. And when a call of the House was done, DPS and nobody was sent out to retrieve them and bring them back to their place of business. And my peers will tell you, some, that we don't want Washington, D.C. type politics in Austin. Well, when they say that, I have an argument for them. When the Democrats left their place of business, they left the capital of Texas where we get work done for Texans. They boarded an airplane and they put beer on their bus and their airplane and they went, where did they go? Washington, D.C. to spend time with the liberal progressive Democrats in order to push their agenda and raise millions of dollars so they could turn around and use those millions against us in our general election. And then a month later, I had to fight. I'm talking fight hard at the front and back. I had to stand at the back mic for 2 hours. I finally, after fighting, got to do a second call of the House. But there were no teeth in it. There was no secondary effects from it. The Speaker right now has way too much power. And the power is given to them by Democrats. And the power is given to them by some Republicans. My ask, I know this is an interview, my ask is I'm calling the Republicans and I just want to talk to you. I just want to talk to them. I'm asking the people out there watching this, tell your member that you just want your member to talk to me. I want to talk to him. I want to take the fear away, the intimidation away, the gamesmanship. This should be very simple. The Speaker should be a servant. The Speaker should be talking to every Republican member, including chairman, vice chairman across the board, about what the priorities are and why aren't they moving. But it's not a dictatorship. I represent 205,000 people, and so does he. So do your reps, whoever they are. And so that's a pretty long, drawn-out answer, and I apologize, but I'm very passionate about running for this position. And I feel like it's been done wrong and unethically for too long.
Thank you, Representative Tinderholt, but I'm going to redirect because I have a bone to pick with this issue of the Ledge Council. So let me give you the grassroots perspective.
Sure.
Over and over and over again last session, we were told, we're waiting on Ledge Council to get the bill out. We're waiting on Ledge Council to get the bill out. This went on for 2-3 weeks. That's ridiculous. So where we are is saying, prove to us that you tried to get the bill from Ledge Council. Where's the email you sent to the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker to tell Ledge Council to get off their backsides and get the bill out? See, it's just a tactic.
Well,
so I'm asking you, if you are the next speaker, what will you do to remove this barrier? Will there be accountability for the Ledge Council?
So the people that work for Ledge Council work for the legislature. And as Speaker of the House, if there's any power in the speakership, the power comes in managing staff. And I think it's an excuse oftentimes. But there's nothing that keeps the Speaker of the House from going to Ledge Council and saying, why is this not done? When will it be done? Where is it? I expect it by noon tomorrow. That needs to be done. Just like misreferring bills or doing the things to thwart the will of the people has become tradition in that building. And I think it's time. where a Speaker of the House holds staff accountable. There shouldn't be any excuses. This should be easy. I was talking to someone earlier today and they said, sometimes they won't get the bills referred. I pledge to refer bills when they come through, sometimes within minutes. I don't know why it takes weeks, and I don't know why Ledge Council holds that paperwork, but I agree with you. And I think transparency is important too. If you're asking for documentation to show why a bill didn't move, by golly, you should get it. If you do an open records request or you come and talk to me as the Speaker, I'm going to find out why. It's important that the people that work for Texans actually do work for Texans, and they don't sit on their thumbs and hands and do nothing. So I agree with you.
Okay, the next question is also a process question to a certain extent. Because of all of this fear and of the very real possibility if a member votes incorrectly and loses, incorrectly in terms of winning or losing, that they will pay a big price for it. I want to tell you a story and then ask a question. The story is about how the guy that's founded Caltech did it. He said, I want to have the best university with the top-notch guys on that West Coast. And he identified 3 professors that if he got those guys, it would create that. So he went to Professor A and said, he knew that each one of them individually wouldn't come by themselves, but he went to Professor A and said, if B and C come, will you come? Repeated the thing. If the other 2 will come, will you come? All 3 conditionally said yes, so he went back to all 3 and said, they've said they'll come. So they did, and that's how the university started. Okay, it occurs to me that a conditional ask is the only way you overcome the fear that's going on in this. Do you plan to use some sort of conditional ask to get to a majority of some way, either at the caucus level or at the overall level, at the full body level, to be able to get this across the wire?
That's a good question, and I'll tell you, I think most people would just want to hurry up and make their phone calls and get their numbers and tally them, but I'm doing it a little bit different. I'm making the phone calls as an introductory, hey, I'm running, here's why I'm running, do you have questions? I'm not yet asking for votes. The reason is I know that fear exists. I've been a part of that legislature for 8 years. I've had members tell me that they're told if they vote wrong on the rule for Democrat chairs, they're going to get punished. So if they vote for me, it's a tough road to take if I lose, right? And so the initial phone calls that I'm making right now are the comfortable calls to have the discussions and just start talking because we have a little bit of time. Now, I do intend to follow up with asks. And the asks will be, are you willing to do this? And if not, why? And if not, what if these people were already doing it? Because I'll tell you this. I'm talking to members. And there are members that are telling me they haven't been able to they haven't been able to talk to Speaker Phelan for 6 to 8 months, and he doesn't respond to texts and voicemails. He knows he's got the Democrats, so he doesn't need to respond. Some of these people are disturbed and angry, and some of these people he thinks are really close to him, and he's led them astray. And he says he's helping them get reelected, but you're not helping Republicans get reelected when you're helping the Democrats push their agenda. And so I'm not to that point yet because I think that there is the respect call of, hey, I'm running. I want to make sure you don't have any questions. And I've gotten the full gamut. I've gotten yelled at. I've gotten told, man, this is great you're doing it, but if I do it, it's tough. And then I've got people that say, do you have a path to victory? And I said, we're going to win. We're going to find a way to win this. And I have people asking about 233. You created this rule. And there are people talking about using that rule so they don't have to vote for you and they get the easy vote to go vote for the Speaker and they don't get punished. So we're having those initial discussions right now, but you will 100%, those are the discussions that are coming. But I want to make sure people listening and that you as well understand. There are people very disgruntled with the current Speaker that are close with him. They're very disappointed, they're frustrated, and I think they see the path that he's bringing them on. He's taking them on a path of dragging Republicans through some junk they shouldn't be dragged through, and it's going to be harmful to them in primaries. And so I think those discussions have to happen, and then the discussions have to go to with the people that I know I have, and telling people who you have, and trying to convince folks to come along. It's tough. I will tell you, it's tough. The hardest part of overcoming this process right now is the fear and intimidation. I'll tell you this. I talked to a member the other day and I said, I'm not asking you today where you are, but I'll tell you something the speaker won't tell you. If you don't vote for me in the end, I'm going to hug you. And if you talk to your members that have talked to me, they'll tell you, yeah, he said that. I say, if you can't vote for me, I'm going to hug you, high five you, respect you, and love you the same, and get to work for Texas after it's all said and done. The current speaker's not doing that. If you don't vote for me, you'll be held accountable. And that's not leadership. That's not healthy. And so I'm right now trying to overcome that fear that people have, because there are a lot of people that are close to the speaker that are not with the speaker. But I think they could be if the fear and intimidation stays. And so part of my job is to try to help them overcome that.
You know, we always like to know inside baseball, right?
Mm-hmm.
So would you please talk about the role that consultants and lobbyists play in our RPT priorities not being passed?
So I'm going to preface that with something I said earlier before I make a statement. The speaker appoints chairs, and the speaker should be talking to the chairmen and chairwomen about where the priorities are. It should be a discussion that happens every day, a respectful, healthy discussion. Where is it? What barriers do I need to remove? However, if lobbyists come to my office and I'm the speaker and they're asking me to push something, my first question, I'm respectful. I will say, hey, thank you for bringing that to me. I agree that that's important, or hey, I totally disagree with it. But the next thing out of my mouth is going to be, I don't dictate what passes and doesn't pass here. Have you talked to 149 other members? But that's the right way to do it. The way it's traditionally been done is that the power is up at the speaker's office. The lobby comes through and special interest groups come through and they ask for permission to pass their bill. I've heard so many people say, well, you know, we got this last session, so that's good enough. I was told that we got our fair share last time. Wrong answer. Your fair share is that your party is pushing the policies and things that are asked for of the members, and the speaker facilitates removing roadblocks and making sure the rules are enforced and keeps talking about it all the time. But sadly, the power at the top, where it's been consolidated, is making all of the decisions. And so they're raising tons of money for the speakership, while the lobby, depending on who you are and what your topic is, wins or loses, right? There's a reason that one of the most important low-hanging fruit in my eyes didn't pass last session, and it's the speaker. Child gender modification. Are you kidding me? Child gender modification was the low-hanging fruit that a lot of Democrats don't like, and a whole lot more Republicans think is disgusting. Heck, people can't smoke cigarettes now. They passed that 2 sessions ago, I think, till you're 21. Can't drink till you're 21, but we're going to let people modify permanently someone's gender, and that didn't pass because of the power base that's held at the speakership, and that individual has to placate to the other party because that party helped him get elected.
Any comment about the consultants?
Consultants. Well, which ones specifically, because there are so many. Are you talking about the consultants for the state reps or the consultants for, okay. There are all different kinds of consultants. But sadly, you see a lot of consultants that are working for the speaker with House members. I'm not going to name them. They know who they are. And that literally adds to the power base that the speaker has. If people have consultants to try to win your election and help you make decisions, they should be at the individual level, not given to members by speakers. And you guys are involved enough, and the people watching are involved enough. You know the top 3 to 5 consultants that are working with the members that work with the speaker. You know who they are, and you know who their state reps are. And I think it's, number one, it's unethical, but it's not illegal. And so they're not breaking any law. But it just adds to the power of the speakership, and it's wrong. It's not. When we go to Austin, we should be doing things that are good for the people of Texas. That is not good for the people of Texas.
My third question is, legislators currently have a broad latitude to change their vote even long after the vote was taken. The ability of legislators to have it both ways by doing the speaker's bidding while telling constituents that I didn't vote that way gives the speaker an army of unaccountable lieutenants that help centralize his position. As speaker, what changes would you make to the vote tallying system to hold legislators accountable?
You know, that's going to be my shortest answer. You'd be surprised. We have a couple members that always say, record vote, all the time, and it makes the members mad. And there's a small cost. There is a fiscal note to that where people have to enter it into the journal. So there is. It's small. I think you literally make everything we do in Austin transparent. We owe that to 30-ish million Texans, regardless of what party they're from. We owe it to them to record every vote. How I talked about committees having to vote on something and not hiding. Everything that's done on the House floor should have a vote with a name attached to a red or a green button. Red for the people out there, no, green is yes. So when Tony Tinderholt votes on something, it's not, it's Tony pushed a button or Tony was recorded in committee. Shortest answer is record every vote, every time, all the time. Because how easy would it be for any of you to go pull up my name and look at how I vote? Right now, oftentimes you don't know. Now you know on the bills that pass and fail on the floor, but all the other stuff you don't.
So just to follow up on that, but specifically their ability to change their vote. So they voted one particular way that shows up on the board, and they've pushed the right button. But then, days later, they're like, you know what, I didn't vote that way. And then they go back and tell their constituents, I didn't vote that way.
So, yeah, that their machine malfunctioned. You guys all know that, right? So I'm going to be fair and tell you as a legislator, I think you guys know that I'm pretty conservative and I try to do the right thing all the time, and sometimes I get it wrong. That's the common terminology that's used, is that your machine malfunctioned, but sometimes, small portion of the time, it's where you really, man, I messed up. I didn't know that was in the bill, but sadly it's used. It gets used exactly the way you're saying. No, go look, I did that. And the average citizen is not going to go to look and see that they changed their vote, right? But if they change their vote, they should do what we do. We put a note in there that says why it changed, right? I'll give an example. I own a company that would have been affected by a bill out there. I white-lighted it, present not voting, and I went and made a statement of why I did present not voting, because it would have affected my business in a positive way. They can do the same thing if their machine malfunctioned. They can say what really happened. And so maybe a rule change to that would be that they have to make, every time that there's a machine malfunction, they have to state what happened. And maybe it's not that the machine malfunctioned. It could be my machine malfunctioned, and they could have other reasons, such as I voted wrong and I didn't know it. But I think there's some category changes, and then maybe some notes shall be made every time. Transparency.
I'd like for you to think about the founding principle of consent of the governed. Give current Texas state government examples of how this foundational principle of a constitutional republic has been trampled.
Of consent. I mean, really, we were talking about it a moment ago. You trust, people elect me and trust me to go do their work. So if there's 60,000 people that vote in an election and 40,000 happen to vote for me, that means that those 40,000 people trust me to go down and work within confines of certain guidelines and rules. And really the confines and guidelines are pretty simple, I think. You have some founding documents that tell you what you can and can't do. You have principles that you protect rights, you don't grant them or take them away. And then you have the priorities that tell you this is what we're going down to Austin to do. We're going to do these things. And I think if when we go to Austin, we think about those things all of the time, and the people trust us to go to Austin to do those things, and we're transparent about it, I think it's pretty easy. But the problem is people go down there, I would say with the, and I hope I didn't misunderstand the consent piece, that they're consenting with me going down there and trusting me to do their bidding. Maybe you need to explain what you mean by that.
Without leading the witness, Representative Tinderholt. Talk to me about checks and balances. Do you have any, are you aware of times when consent of the governed and the checks and balances we're supposed to have in a constitutional form of government, a Republican form of government, when those checks and balances have failed in Texas government?
I'm going to disappoint you. In D.C. and in Texas and probably every other state, sadly, I think they fail all the time. Almost all the time I think they fail because most members, many members, not most, many members go to Austin with the intent of creating what they think is important in Austin, and that's what they do. And I think far too often that people forget that they're there for other people. And so I think most of the time it's done that way, to be honest with you. And I know that's not something you want to hear, but I know that you're very involved, so you know that I'm probably right. And it's disappointing.
Okay, I'm going to skip to down in my list of questions down to one that I think I'm burning to ask. In the race to pick the United States House Speaker that's coming up here for the next legislative session, a guy by the name of Russ Voigt, who's a former OMB director and is now the president of a group called, Center for Renewing America. He said he's opposed to McCarthy for Speaker. He said it. He says, I think he's a nice guy, but I think he's a peacetime Speaker. And with the war on America that's going on right now from the left and the globalists, we need a wartime Speaker. And so my question for you is, given that everything we hold dear here in Texas is under assault from those very same players, do you think we need a wartime Speaker? Are you a wartime Speaker in that regard? And compare your sense of urgency about these issues and these assaults and your commitment to do something about it to your opponent for Speaker.
Multi-pronged question, but I'll tell you this. The current Speaker is a nice guy. I know people are probably surprised to hear me say that. I think he's a nice guy. But I think he's failing our party. And sadly, I don't think that he should, that I would not want, I voted last time for Dade Phelan. And it was a mistake. And at least I can sit in front of my constituency and tell them, I think he's a nice guy, but I think I made a mistake. Doesn't mean I hate him. Doesn't mean I don't have respect for him. He serves the people of his district. So whether it was wartime or not, war on culture or not, I don't think that he's the right person. I will tell you this. I think you all know that our nation, our way of life, Christianity, our children, science are all under attack. The other side can't define what a man and a woman is. It's pretty simple. My daughter is 6, my son is 4, and he can tell you what a man and a woman is. And he probably doesn't even really quite understand it, but he can explain it. He can tell you enough so that you'd understand. They're sexualizing our children. They want to interfere in elections, and they like that they're not felonies. They're cheating. They're destroying the culture of America. And it is. We're at war right now, a culture war and a political war. And I will just tell you that I feel prepared for that. And the reason I'm ready are many reasons. First is I am combat tested. I've been to combat. I led in combat. I know what that means. Different kind, but I know what it means. And I think that having core moral and ethical beliefs is just as important as being battle proven. And I have those. I have a family that stands behind the belief that Texas is great and that I have to be a part of protecting it for our children, my 4- and 6-year-old. I'm not beholden to anybody. I wouldn't be beholden to the Democrats because I'm not making phone calls to them. I'm not counting on them to get elected. I think right now is a time where a bold speaker, a bold leader is needed. Someone that is unafraid to do what's right. Unafraid to say that the border is a serious issue. I watched America's sons and daughters die protecting other borders. I actually watched it with my eyes. Yet we have criminals, terrorists, children being raped and human trafficked, fentanyl coming across the border. Americans and people that aren't Americans are dying. Human toll because of that border. I say we're being invaded. I say we need to quit sexualizing our children. I say our flags are important. Our flags are super important. I say you shouldn't kneel. I say white, black, Hispanic, Asian. I think everyone is equal. I think that we need to quit having people be afraid to stand up to the other side. 2 or 3% of the other side says something is true and everyone else freaks out over it. Guess what? It's not true. Critical race theory, I don't care what the name is, needs to stop in Texas. You need a speaker that's willing to stand up at the front and say, are you kidding me? We're not, this is insane. This is Texas. These things are important. The Republican people count on it. Christianity is important to the voters in Texas. Christianity is important to me. All of the things that we in this room think are important, sadly, I think get left to the side because the current way the speaker's chosen isn't according to all the things I just talked about. It's according to personalities and being beholden to a certain group of people so that you can get elected. So I am the right person, and I'm ready. And it won't be easy, but the principled part will be. And you know, I was telling someone before we all got here today, I believe that people are made for a certain thing at a certain time, and it's going to be different things at different times in someone's life. I'm made for right now. This time is for me to do what I'm doing. Whether I win or lose, I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing. As a Christian, as a dad, as a husband, as a son, and as a Texan. I'm where I need to be.
Like Mordecai said to Esther, consider that you were made for times such as these.
My question really touches on, I think, what you've already been talking about a little bit, but I want to take it a little bit further. Do you think our current legislature understands the real threat of communism to our state and to our nation, and how close we are to losing our liberties, including the rights of parents' authority over their own children? Is there a sense of urgency in the Texas legislature, and why or why not?
So, to some members, yes. I think the answer is yes. But not enough. And when I told you that leaders can influence without being dictators, I think a speaker is needed that stresses the importance of freedom and liberty, and China and Iran and Syria and North Korea, and how all of those adversarial nations are trying to essentially get into our power grid, how they're trying to buy Texas property, how they're using social media to influence our children and potentially elections. I think right now that oftentimes people go to Austin, and I mean no disrespect to my peers, I don't. But I think we get so wrapped up in the 5 or 10 or 50 bills that we have that that's really important, and I think part of the speaker's job is to remind people of what's important. Remind them what the priorities are. Remind them what's important to our children in the state of Texas. We're a huge state, 8th, 9th largest economy in the world. I think what we do in the Texas House matters. And I think people across the country watch. So I think the short answer is, I think some of them know it when we get there. But I think sometimes it gets forgotten and lost in the mix of the chaos that happens in that building. And you need a leader that's going to keep people on track and remind them what's really important.
Alcohol consumption during session has reportedly become a problem many times over the past few sessions. Out-of-sight bars have been reportedly set up at various times, and members have even had to be dragged off the floor. Some report that this is the tip of the debauchery. Thousands of Texans have died to establish our Republican form of government, and I personally believe that as the people's house, the Texas Capitol should be treated as hallowed ground. What rule changes would you support to keep legislators from disgracing our republic?
So first and foremost, there's no alcohol in my office. I don't allow it. Not because I don't drink it, because I like to have a drink every now and again, but we just don't have it in my office. Drinking happens at the Capitol. Speaker doesn't get to dictate everything that happens, but the speaker can facilitate rule changes to where there's not alcohol in the building. I think I would support that. I don't think I'd have a problem with that. But you got to remember, I'm running for speaker to get away from the dictatorship. And so it would be incumbent upon me to tell you that there's 149 members that would be voting on that, and that we would need people, the constituents, to say they don't want it. There's other things that could be done too. I think the way to make something like that happen is for the speaker to take bold initiative and talk about the repercussions of people drinking alcohol and being intoxicated. But I think the movement has to come from all sides. It has to be the members want it, the speaker wants to assist in showing the importance of it, and then the voters and the grassroots need to tell members that they don't want to tolerate it. But I want to say in the same breath that I talk about the speaker not being a dictator. So I wouldn't dictate a rule change. I want to be fair and tell you I wouldn't dictate it, but I think you could encourage it.
There has long been controversy over legislators using their leadership positions for personal and/or family profit. You own a security consulting company that contracts with public schools. What efforts do you make and would you make to avoid every appearance of conflict of interest, and what changes would you make to current disclosure standards for legislators?
So, it's interesting. Because I'm running for speaker, I almost think that's why my company's having some issues right now. But one thing that's really important to me and my business partner will tell you is when we're dealing with public entities, that he deals with them. We removed myself as an owner from the website. I'm not on the website anymore. And the reason I'm not on the website is I don't want any undue influence. Now, it's legal for a Texas legislator, because we're a part-time legislature, to do contracts with cities, counties, state, schools. But to remove any ideas that could be any improprieties, I try not to interact during the contracting process a whole lot. I've learned lessons, and the lessons are that you remove yourself from the website and you don't have a lot of interaction during the contracting phase. One small contract that we got, the individual came to me and goes, "You own that company?" I'm like, "Yes, I own it." "I didn't know that." And I said, "Well, that was by design." I just think it's important. Now, you're not always going to be able to do that. People know who you are and they know what you own. So that's not always 100% successful. But I think disclosure is super important. The disclosure side is absolutely necessary. So I disclose my contracts. I think the law requires that if you own 50% or more and 51%, well, I disclose them because I think it's fair for people to know. Now, what does that do? That opens us up to a lot more open records requests for our customers. I mean, my customers get it and they're okay, but I think disclosure is important, and I think that people should have to disclose more of what they do with government. Doesn't matter what level of government. I think you should have to report everything you do. Doesn't matter if you do a $1,000 or a $100,000 contract. I mean, I think if I remember right, all bids, any proposals over $2,500 have to go out for bid. I've heard of people before I was ever elected winning bids and not doing work. So I think that, along with having to win a bid or a proposal, they should have to actually accomplish work, and you should have to report all of the work that pays you through taxpayer money. I think it's important.
When Dennis Bonnen was involved in his downfall, the problems he was having with his downfall, Russ Ramsey was of the Texas Tribune was writing about that, and he said about the race for speaker. I will summarize it. It's a trade of protection for members, and I think I interpret it to mean from the grassroots for power for the speaker. The exact quote that Ramsey said was, "The compact between a speaker and the members of the Texas House who elect him goes like this: protect the members from the outside world and from fratricidal colleagues. You know who you are. And in return, you get the perks of speakership." I wanted to know what you think about what Russ Ramsey thinks he's describing as reality.
You know how a speaker protects members? Tells them to vote their district. The other way a speaker protects members is you get elected by the majority party and you influence and push the priorities in a respectful way. That helps members get reelected. That helps members be respected by the public. That helps people want to go vote for you. I always hear the words bad vote. I can honestly tell you in this room, I don't take bad votes, not knowingly. I've taken some. I told you last time I voted for the speaker. Again, I'm going to reiterate. I don't dislike him. It was a bad vote. It was a bad decision. I make bad decisions sometimes. We all do. There's no bad vote. I always hear, why are you cutting us up with that amendment? I'm not cutting you up. You chose to do something that the people that elected you don't want you to do. If you did what they wanted you to do, you wouldn't be here in front of me asking me why you're getting cut up. I did an amendment that my district wants me to do. It's easy. So should a speaker protect members? Sure. But not the way you said. A really good way to protect members is tell them to be an individual, vote for the people in your district, regardless of how it is, and try to respectfully push the priorities with the chairman and the Republican caucus and the members in the Republican Party. If you do right in Austin, the people at home are going to love you. They just are. And that's what everyone wants. Everyone in politics wants to get reelected. Well, I don't think anyone needs protecting in Austin. Do what's right. And I will tell you that I'm running for speaker. I'm trying to garner Republican votes, and there will be some Republican members that are going to feel like I'm poking them in the eye. I want to say to the camera, I'm not poking you in the eye. I'm saying I will protect you as Speaker of the House because I will encourage you to do what your voters want you to do, and I won't ask you to do what I want you to do, which is what's currently being done. That's the way a speaker protects the members.
What do voters need to know to be better informed about their representatives and how well they are representing their interests in Austin?
So, interestingly, I don't think enough people meet. I'm excited about that question because we meet people every Wednesday. Enough people don't meet with their representative. And so they don't know who they are and kind of what they stand for. We knock a lot of doors too. There's scorecards out there. There's tons of scorecards. Some are biased, some aren't. I'm not going to go into names of scorecards, but I'll tell you one of the best ones, that the one that is the best, meaning doesn't really have bias to it, I don't believe, is Rice University. It's very, you're conservative or you're liberal, and all the votes are tallied and they're not handpicked. And this is nothing against any of the scorecards, but if you really want to see on a scale of 100 to 150 on where your representative lies, if you're a super lib, if you're very liberal and you want your person to be liberal and they're on the really low liberal side, be happy. If you want someone in the top 10 and they're way on the top 10 far conservative, right? And if you're a member that wants, or you're a voter that wants your person to be in the middle, you can look at this and they literally tally all the votes. You can look at the number or you can visually see the chart and see where their name falls. You can, oh, they're about in the middle. I think looking at some of these scorecards, watch the House floor. You can do it from home. A lot of people don't know it. My daughter, I have tons of pictures of her going, "That's my daddy," like cheering and being excited when they're watching it online, and my wife takes pictures. Well, citizens of Texas can go online. My mom watches from Iowa sometimes. Watching your representative do the work. Go online and look at the journals. You get to see what they really did. But I think meeting with them, looking at the journals, looking at scorecards, talking to their staff, but watch the video online. If you can't watch it live, go back and watch them when they speak. Call the staff at the Capitol and say, "Hey, when did so-and-so do anything on the House floor?" Go watch them. Some they'll be really proud of and some they won't. But I think it's a multi-pronged thing because you're not going to figure out what your rep's doing by doing only one. You have to look at all of them.
The Speaker has, in many ways, turned into a campaign bundler. At present, Speaker Phelan has at least $5 million on cash and gives out, in some cases, over $100,000 to individual candidates. Do you believe that it's appropriate for a Speaker, or even the Governor, to be the primary donor for legislators, and what changes to the rules or statutes could we make to break the back of the lobbyist-funded
That's
establishment?
actually a good question. Of the people, by the people, and for the people, right? Of the people, by the people, for the people. So when the government, someone like the Speaker or Governor is giving out money, is that really still of the people, by the people, and for the people? I challenge that. I disagree. You know, the Speaker put out, I didn't see it, by the way, but I've been told numerous times about a tweet. And if I'm wrong, I apologize in advance, but I've been told more than 5 times. So I'm going to believe it's true. The Speaker put out a tweet that said, "Here are the reasonable Republicans I'm supporting in the general election." Can anyone validate it? Did you see that? Anyone know? Well, those reasonable people, I'm guessing, are the people that he gave money to. Well, guess what? I didn't get any money because I must not be reasonable. There are freshmen. I'm talking to all the members. There are freshmen that didn't get money because they must not be reasonable. There are senior people that have been in the Capitol a long time that must not be reasonable because they did not get money. So now we have elected officials dictating who they want to be in the Capitol because they do their bidding and they do what they're told. I'll leave you with this. Of the people, by the people, and for the people.
You mentioned the grid a few moments ago. People are all over Texas, and you're probably hearing this from your constituents, are facing higher and higher electric bills. And with winter coming up, I think we're going to see more of it. Could you name a couple of things that are the underlying problems with the electric grid? Please name those.
Sure. I'm going to start by telling you that I've authored the Protect the Power Grid bill every session since I've been there. Foreign adversaries want to get into our system and destroy it. There are simple ways to spend hundreds of dollars to destroy pieces and parts of it. Solar flares are past due that could absolutely destroy our system. But you know what we did to ourselves? We gave an estimated $19 billion of taxpayer-funded money to wind and solar. Think about that. I'm going to surprise you for a second. I think wind and solar is great as supplemental power. Wind and solar is cool. It's neat. If someone decides to put wind or solar on their home to do it, that's fine. I think it's great. But as a legislator, 30 million Texans and another 1,500, plus the people flooding the border coming across that we don't know the numbers of, are using electricity. It's growing. Smart enough to realize that a piece of coal or a unit of natural gas has a scientifically proven calculation as to how much power that will create. So we know what we're getting. We already know. Wind and solar today might produce 70% of what they promise, and tomorrow it might produce 1%. Grid reliability is one of the most important things we can have. The reliability of what we think is normal. We go flip a switch. My kids don't know any better. They flip the switch, the light comes on. Turn the water comes out. Right? Sadly, we gave $19 billion away using 313 subsidies to wind and solar over about a 10-year period. That same money, if you're going to give incentives, and I'm not saying I agree with incentives, if you're going to give incentives, right now is the right time to give them to nuclear and thermal energy. Right now is the time to do it because we're in trouble. We're in so much trouble. Power should be considered a part of infrastructure. Power is life for people. I don't want to scare people, but 50 to 70% of the population, 50 to 90% of the population of Texas could perish if we lost our grid for the 2 years we thought we could. Think about that for a moment. So what I would say is, first and foremost, we have to make sure that we're building thermal power generation immediately. Nuclear needs to be done. We have to increase the power generation across the state of Texas. And we need to ensure that it's safe. And what do I mean by safe? I'm saying secure. There are things out there right now that we can put on and in and around our power grid to protect it from nuclear attack, thermal protection. It exists. There's a cost. I'm going to take a moment to tell you a success we had last session. I don't know if you guys may not know in this room. 313 was getting extended. Were you guys aware of that? I did 9 amendments to that bill. 9. The author was pretty mad that I dropped the 9 amendments off on his desk. Make a long story short, after a couple of those started passing, he pulled his bill down and killed 313 extension because he was mad that my amendments were passing. The Senate was going to bring it back up, but ended up not bringing it back up. Your $19 billion will no longer go to wind and solar. It will not go to it. I did not single-handedly kill that bill, but my amendments were a very, very integral part of making it go away. Here's what should scare you as taxpayers. 313 is allegedly coming back under another name. People that you and I love and respect are talking about possibly supporting it. The number one advocate for it is the Speaker of the Texas House. If we're going to do anything with taxpayer money, if we're going to do any kind of incentives, and I think the people in this room and watching realize I don't like incentives. But if we're going to do something, let's do it for thermal and nuclear energy so that when my children and your grandchildren and kids turn on the lights, that the light comes on. When the elderly couple needs their breathing machine to work, that it works. Because we lost Texans' lives because of the power grid. We owe it to Texans to fix the power grid, and fixing it is multifaceted. You can't just look at it as one piece. I'm talking a lot about this one topic because I've authored the bill over and over. And people, I don't want people to be scared. What I want people to do is be involved. Tell your legislator how important it is. Tell the Speaker you don't want another version of 313 that's going to help wind and solar. If leadership, whoever it is going to do something for power, and you're going to use incentives, then please do it for thermal and nuclear. Texans deserve it.
Okay, I'm back to process. You know that, of course, that the Straussian strategy for getting the speakership in 2009 was to take 11 Republican legislators, and we can call them the Republican Betrayer Caucus.
I beat one of them.
Yes, great. The Republican Betrayer Caucus, who were willing to go to team up with the Democrats so that they could get power against their fellow Republicans. Okay. Well, I happen to have talked to some people who told me that that same thing was being tried last time, and Phelan went in with 40 other Republicans, said we don't want them to repeat that strategy, so they did a preemptive strike to go to the Democrats. This year, there's a math formula that goes with that. It's the how many more Republicans do you have than 75, and how many betrayers you have. This year, the formula is you got to have 12 betrayers to be able to repeat the Straussian strategy. And my question is, do you think there's 12 betrayers out there, and how are you going to counteract those betrayers if they try it?
So I'm going to tell you, and some in the room may not like this. I know it's an interview. These people are my colleagues, so I don't call them betrayers. I know that the voters do sometimes. But I will tell you this about them. Some people covet power more than service. They do, and it exists. And it's going to happen because they covet power so much. The speaker wants to be speaker. Certain members want to be chairs. Certain members know they might get a vice chair. But knowing that your bill might pass is really important. And I use this analogy a lot. I really believe Austin is, it's more simple than I ever knew. It took me a couple sessions to figure out. Austin is about leverage and pressure. And when I told my wife that, she said, explain. And I said, well, they do things, or you do things that create leverage. For instance, I author bills and I tell them how important this bill is to me. I've just given them leverage to create pressure on me. Or I vote for the speaker. The speaker gives me something, says, oh yeah, I'm going to help you get your stuff done. Leverage was just created to put pressure on that individual to get them and influence them to do what they are told to do. Now I want to be clear, it's not usually you better do what you're told. That's not usually how it happens. It's peer pressure. Right now though, according to some members, it is direct. Do not vote for that or you will be held accountable for the Democrat chairs. I think that culture needs to change. I think the caucus needs to hold them accountable. I think the grassroots need to make sure that people know who they are to their voters and that people hold them accountable at the ballot box, to be honest. I think, well let me tell you this. You can guess how many Democrats I'm calling. For the speaker's race, I've called 0. How many Democrats do you think called me? 3. I didn't know what to expect. They were all very kind and generous in their phone calls. I was told that I understand why you're doing this, and I'm not mad. Because on the floor, you guys see from you're the individual voters and grassroots, you see the things we do in Austin, people get frustrated, but they're still my colleagues, right? They're my colleagues. We have a mutual respect. I got a phone call from 3 of them. And they were very kind and generous. They're like, I see why you're running. I think you could actually pull this off because there's things in the platform that are important to people. All 3 of them said, I'm not mad. I'm not blaming you. But I got some of the Republican members that are literally just not being very Christian about it. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it. I'm at the right place at the right time to do what I'm doing. I was made for a time. I was made for this time. Whether I win or lose, I was made for this time. I think the caucus needs to hold them accountable. Grassroots need to hold them accountable, and the individual voters need to hold them accountable. We've tried the rules. We tried to do everything in the rules when it comes to electing the speaker, and it doesn't work. It's just not working. It doesn't work. I'll give you the example. The lady that I beat was one of those. I was found. Someone said, hey, you need to do this. I worked hard. I beat her because the voters knew what she did. I think more of that needs to happen. What you guys do and what the grassroots does is invaluable. You inform voters of what's really happening. Now, you know what? It's not a question. Do you know what a lot of legislators don't like? They don't like grassroots telling how Austin works. Well, guess what? I want Austin to be simple. I want people to go down to Austin, my peers, Democrats and Republicans. I want them to go down there and feel free to push the red or green button and do amendments that they want to do without undue influence and disrespectfulness. I want to respect Democrat bills. I'm going to disagree with a lot of them. Guess what? Pro-choice stuff could end up hitting the floor if I was Speaker, because the committees are run by the committee members and that stuff comes, and we can take note and enjoy what we will do to that bill on the House floor as Republicans. So.
I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. What is the World Economic Forum, and why are they a threat to Texans?
Can you explain that a little bit better to me? What do you mean by that?
Are you familiar with the entity called the World Economic Forum?
I'm not.
Okay. You know what then? I'm going to switch and ask
Well,
another.
before you switch, you realize after we leave here, I'm going to Google that.
Yes, and that's appropriate. Yeah, I'm going to ask you another question. I might come back to that later, but let me ask you something else then. Describe for me the enumerated principles in the RPT platform, the foundation upon which they are based, and why they are so important for all citizens of the state of Texas.
Say that one more time.
Describe the enumerated principles in the RPT platform, the foundation that those principles are based on, and why they are so important for all citizens of the state of Texas.
Of the RPT platform.
Yes.
So I'm going to be pretty simple-minded, and I'm going to be as simple-minded as you can about it, okay? We talked about this a few minutes ago. The average voter in Texas is not going to read the platform. Can we agree that the average citizen is not?
I tell you what, let me rephrase it a little bit
Okay.
and see if I can help you. So the Republican Party platform is made up of a preamble, 10 principles, and then a whole bunch of planks.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about the principles that are in that preamble and those first 10 statements?
I can, but
And what they're based on?
we can, but I think what the most important, that's what I was getting at, the most important piece of that, all of it's important, right? The entire platform is super important. And I think you'd be surprised that a lot of members haven't read it, right? A lot of members haven't read the Constitution, they haven't read any of the founding documents. But I want to go to what's the most important part, according to me. All parts of it are important. But really, really for a legislator that has ethics and morals and knows what right versus wrong is, the most important part of that is what? It's the planks. It's the things that we're supposed to do when we go to Austin. That's the most important thing, right? When it comes right down to it, if your legislators have ethics and morals and they believe in the Constitution, they believe in the simplicity of the documents, our founding documents, they're all going to go to Austin and they're going to do what the planks say. Sadly, we have people go down there, and we've talked about this a moment ago. We have people that go to Austin, and they want to create that platform on their own. They want to create what is going to happen in Austin and come out with a narrative. By the way, I've heard the most conservative session ever. Most conservative session ever. Now, if you look, we didn't pass all the priorities. We didn't pass everything that was inside the Republican priorities. We didn't. Matter of fact, we left a lot of stuff on the table. And the stuff we did pass was weak. I beg to differ. I don't think it was the most conservative session ever. We left low-hanging fruit on the table. And it's because people didn't believe in every piece and every part of our Constitution and our founding documents. So, I mean, I wish the members would, go ahead.
And then I'll stop picking on you on this.
You're not picking on me.
If you are elected speaker, would you allow me, the chairman of the party, and my Legislative Priorities Committee members to come to the Republican Caucus retreat and train you on our party platform?
I didn't know where you were going with it. Now I do. That's a little more direct. So the short answer is absolutely. And here's why. I spent too long in the military. I spent most of my adult life in the military. And you know what makes our military amazing? Why we're the most powerful military in the world? Because we're so well trained. They say if you train the way you will fight the way you train. Does that make sense? If you make training realistic, when you go to combat, you will have already been close to it, and you'll be good at it. And our military is good because we train the way we're going to fight so that we fight the way we're going to train. How on earth can we go to Austin and fight for the priorities if most members don't read them, and if we aren't trained? And I'm going to legislators, and I'm not trying to belittle anyone, I'm saying it about myself too. I say this to all of the people that come meet with me. We know a little about a lot of stuff as a legislator. We're just people that decided to run for office. But the people in the professions and the things that bills affect know everything about that. And so as legislators, it's our job to listen to them and let them coach us and make us really good at that one topic. There's no way for a legislator to just go out and be a legislator and know everything. The reason I come full circle with that is, how can we, reading the priorities is one thing, but then hearing what the discussions behind it were and why it came and what fell off of the priorities and what fell off the priorities to make that priority number 8. What was 9? And why were these the 8 that were chosen? Those discussions need to happen, because then what it does is it gives the worldview to the legislator as to why these are the 8 and why they were that important that they hit there. And you get all of the knowledge and the background discussions that happen and all the arguments and the fussing. In that training, we're going to hear all of that. So then when we're on the floor and we're fighting the Democrats, we're fighting for a unified cause instead of just something that's written on a piece of paper that we may or may not have read. Sorry it took you so long to get to that.
So my question is, there are many bills that were before the Texas House last session that addressed the 2022 primary ballot propositions on gender mutilation of minors, securing the border, protecting Texas from COVID vaccine mandates, elimination of property taxes, securing our elections, and election freedom, or education freedom. These bills, if presented to the people of Texas, would doubtless pass wildly, and yet dozens of bills addressing these issues never even got a hearing in committee, even committees chaired by Republicans. What tactics would you suggest? And so you mentioned a minute ago how important grassroots have been. So what tactics would you suggest for grassroots to expose these quasi-Democrats who call themselves Republicans, who dwell in the Texas House and are reelected by their unknowing constituents election after election? And then also, what rule changes would you support to force bills to a floor vote, bypassing committees entirely?
Okay. So rhetorical question. Why is the Speaker of the House allegedly threatening members to vote no on a priority, right? No Democrat chairs. Yet he's not threatening people to vote for priorities, right? Think about that for a moment. The Speaker and the way that it's been created and formed over time has that base of power there. So I'm going to go to the last question that you had. What do we do to change it? What do we do to change it to make sure that everything gets a vote? And then I'll come back to the priorities that just sat there. I think there are rule changes that have to happen. They have to happen. Everything that goes, so I think the first one is, when you author a bill, that it automatically gets requested to have a hearing. You can't hide behind, I authored the bill, and you go home and tell people you authored a bill, but you never asked for it to be heard. I think the second thing is, once it's heard, that every bill that's heard gets a vote with a name behind a yes or a no. Every bill that passes in that committee goes to the correct calendar. In that calendar, local and consent or general, every bill that comes there gets a vote of a yes or no with a name behind it. Every bill that passes that calendar gets added to the closest calendar, so if it can go on in 2 days, it goes on. And they're heard in the order in which they're funneled into the committees. Now, they're still going to play games. They're going to push your bill that is a priority, and the committee's going to hear it during the last week, and then they're going to push it to calendars at the last minute, and it's going to die there because of time, right? That's where a good speaker comes in. A good speaker, you're not going to have a rule that is going to be able to dictate everything that happens, because they're going to find ways around it. A true Republican speaker will go and work those bills, not with fear and intimidation. Hey, these are part of the platform. These are part of the priorities. Where is it? Why is it sitting there? Who's holding it up? Are there any barriers that you need me to get involved in to withdraw the barriers? Or who do I need to talk to? Who do a group of us need to go talk to? Who do we need to convince? And I think those types of things have to be implemented. Some of them rules, some of them with a good speaker that is involved. And then I think the stuff that didn't pass last session, I can't remember the second question that you asked about all of the bills. Can you?
So one thing I asked is like, what can grassroots do?
Yeah.
Expose these
Yeah, so
these folks, and then that second one was, is what can you do? And I think you've kind of addressed that.
So you're already doing some of it. I think it's important for voters to know what their people are doing or not doing, right? And so you're already listening, you're already watching. But I think something that's not really been done is something I mentioned a few minutes ago. I think grassroots could maybe do a better job at teaching individual voters how to keep watch on their folks. Because when you do that, you're going to get more reporting across all the platforms. So what do I mean by that in simple, short terms? Johnny and Mary are voters. They're kind of getting involved in grassroots. They're not quite sure yet. You're teaching them how to, hey, you can meet with them. Hey, you can go online and watch them live. You can watch recorded stuff. You can go to these scorecards and look. By golly, I bet John and Mary are going to find things that you didn't see and know, and they're going to be reporting it and talking about it. So I think knowledge on how they can keep track of their legislators and see what bills they're passing. And I think even a mechanism, I'm going to go back to the other question, a mechanism as my brain's moving, on the fact that someone did a checkbox, that they actually did indeed ask for a hearing. If you can't make it mandatory that everything gets heard, that there's a checkbox that's visual online that says that someone asked for a hearing and didn't get it. There's a lot of answers to that question, and it's messy, sadly.
This next question is about parental choice in education. Would you, and it'll be a two-part question. First part is, are you aware of concerns regarding parental choice in education? And if you know what some of those concerns are from a parent's perspective, would you cite those?
Yes. Sadly, we're seeing it across the country, but it's happening in Texas. So many concerns that I feel like education, pieces and parts of the education system are imploding on themselves. I think they're self-perpetuated. When we have sexualization of children in schools, I'm just going to use that as an example. Sexualization of children in schools, where they are taught what transgender is, and they're asked or told or queried as to what sex do you think you are. I want to teach my child what that is. I'm going to teach my child at the appropriate time that I deem necessary. This is just one topic. I think those are things that I need to be able to have discussions with my child. Now, when you can't do that because a school district is not being held accountable, and that's a totally different topic, accountability of the school district. I think a parent should have the choice to move their child to public, private, charter school or homeschool. It should be their choice, and they should take their funding with them. It's not going to destroy the entire education system like some people think. If you look historically across the states, it ends up being less than 1%. But if someone is being told, has a child that's either being groomed or being sexualized in the library, or sexualized because they have to have boys in the girls' restroom, or I'm in a school where they're allowing girls to play in boys' sports, which we were supposed to have fixed, or there's a school that's not supposed to be teaching CRT, but they do it anyway. I mean, I could go on and on about the list of things. Or the school board is hiding things that a superintendent or a school board president did. Or, I mean, we see them in the news. We hear about them all the time. I think that the parental choice needs to come in where the parents get to choose what happens with their child. But then there's the flip side of that. I think that the school districts were failing at holding them accountable. I think TEA is failing at holding these school districts accountable to certain standards. Standards of discipline, standards of accountability. I think about these young children at these schools. An example was in one of the school districts in an area where I'm at, that I had a parent meet me on a Wednesday and say, I'm a teacher at a school district, I'm afraid to tell you this. I'm afraid for my name to be known. There was a substitute teacher for a week in the class that was LGBTQ. And they asked the children every day what sex they thought they were and whether they thought they liked boys or girls. And by the end of the week, they did a query on paper to ask how many children thought they might not be the sex they think they are. And over 50% questioned their sexuality. And if I remember right, it was third or fourth graders. Think about that for a moment. My daughter's in first grade at 6 years old. That's 8 or 9 years old. Substitute teacher. Where's the accountability? Where are the standards? Where's the discipline? Who's checking it? Why are teachers afraid to have their name used that they saw this? Why do we have librarians that are putting what I would consider pornography out for young children to see? Why doesn't TEA and each school district have standards for that are statewide? I mean, I could go on and on. It's broken and it's wrong.
So let me clarify what I really intended with that question. So everybody's talking about getting to see a school choice bill, to read the bill.
Yep.
Okay. So there are some long-running concerns that private school parents and homeschool parents have about school choice. Do you know what some of those concerns are?
Yeah, if your child's already homeschooled or your child's in a private school, that they won't be able to participate in taking the money, any of the money with their, is that what you're talking about? They can't take any of the money with them? They have to already be in a public school? Is that what you're talking about?
No.
Explain to me what you mean then, please.
Well, I don't want to lead the witness,
Okay.
Mr. Tinderholt. So I'm just saying, are you aware of what would be probably the number one concern that parents who have already made the choice not to have their kids in public schools, but are either homeschooling, have them in a parochial or a private school? What would be the concerns about knowing what is in a school choice bill? What would be one of the first concerns?
So maybe I'm still misunderstanding, but all of the bills that I've seen bring a percentage of your money, but it literally excludes people that are already not in the public school system. Almost every bill I've seen says that if you want to take your child from a public school and move them to a private or homeschool, you can't take the money with you if they're already in a private or at home.
Okay.
Is that
We'll
what you
just,
mean?
we'll
Okay.
just, no, but I'll just let Mr. Glass go and we'll follow up on that later.
Absolutely.
Okay, this question is my only issue-oriented question of the evening or the afternoon, and it is what I consider probably the most important issue. Plank 257 of the RPT platform calls for a legislative declaration of invasion at the border, so that Texas has a solid constitutional case to repel the invaders and deport the invaders who make it across. As Speaker, would you work to implement that instruction by the Republican rank and file? Do you think your opponent would?
So I don't think my opponent would because he hasn't. I will tell you that even if it were not in the Republican priorities, I would push for it. I have been very fortunate on the committees I'm on where I've been to the border several times with both DPS and the National Guard. I've flown up and down the border. I've sat and talked to individual soldiers. I've spent time with commanders, spent time with DPS, met Border Patrol agents, was on the boats going up and down the river. I spent quite a bit of time down there. It's bad. It's, you know what the scariest part is? Seeing the young children that you know are being trafficked and knowing that our jails are so full that sometimes we're hearing that the human traffickers, there's not enough jail space for them. Knowing that I have friends that left the military and now they work in three-letter agencies, and their only job, a few of them are, to track adversarial nation people coming across the border. And the fact that those guys have a job and that's what they do should scare people. Bottom line is we're being invaded by drugs, by illegal immigrants, by human traffickers, by cartels. We're literally being invaded. Our nation and our state is being invaded. And it's imperative that we make that call. We have to tell the rest of the country and the world that Texas is being invaded, because it's not just being invaded by people from Nicaragua, El Salvador, Dominican. It's not, I mean, they're flying down there and then coming up. It's Syrians, Chinese, Russians. These people are coming across our border and we don't know what their intentions are, and we don't even know how many of them we missed. The short answer is absolutely 100% wholeheartedly would push that narrative and try to influence in a positive way all 149 members. I don't know how Democrats can't see that this is a problem. I don't get it. It's unsafe, and it's horrible to watch. Everyone, they forget the humanity side of those people being trafficked that are coming across. They're human beings, and they're being sex trafficked, and they're dying from heat, and I couldn't imagine the life of servitude in a sexual manner of being trafficked. It's just horrible, horrific.
Right. I'm going to come back for just a moment on the school choice legislative priority and ask you this question. Have you ever known government to not place a condition when it gives out money? To not place a condition on that?
Yeah, we take a lot of federal funding. And with the federal funding comes tons of strings attached. And so I think I might know where you're going with it in regards to any school choice bill where there's tons of strings, and they try, essentially, what they try to do, or what the bills have tried to do, that homeschool folks and private school folks don't want, is what they've essentially started to do with charter schools. They have the same standards. If you're going to get money tied to it, you have to, an example might be that you have to meet the A through F scale, or when it comes to sports. Is that what you're talking about? So if I know where you're going with this, I think that parents know best. The parents are the one paying the tax dollars. If I'm paying tax dollars and I choose that my child is going to use a certain mechanism for learning, regardless of what it is, the government should not meddle in how or what I'm doing in order for me to get that funding. I think, like me, my daughter doesn't go to public school. We checked a whole bunch of schools. We thought about homeschooling. My daughter goes to a Catholic school. It's because we chose that school because as parents, we felt like we wanted the religious side and we wanted that specific school for what they do. We didn't choose it because it met A through F or because the government was trying to use their dipstick to go, okay, how good is that school? Well, that school is not good enough to meet the standard for, well, I'm the dictator of that, right? I get to decide as a parent what's good enough for my child. When is government too much government? And it's when they're tying tons of strings and they're tying parents' hands.
So Speaker Phelan routinely uses his own brand of parliamentary procedure to silence debate. You may recall last session when he summarily ruled as non-germane Representative Slayton's amendment to add gender mutilation to the definition of child abuse on a bill pertaining to child abuse. Legislators will tell stories of the back mic being turned off, and in the last day of the 87th regular session, Phelan gavelled out with nary a pause to allow anyone to object. What can be done to force the Speaker to adhere to the proper parliamentary procedure, and what changes would you enact, if Speaker, to ensure that you are held accountable to proper rules of order?
You know, I think I'm going to surprise you. Remember I told you I'm not always right? I made a mistake during the special sessions last session. I went to the parliamentarians almost daily to try to hold the Democrats accountable. Something I forgot was that the parliamentarians are not the decision makers, the speaker is. I allowed, now think about this for a moment, at least I have transparency and honesty to tell you that I allowed the parliamentarians to manipulate the rules to tell me that I couldn't do something, and I fought them every day on it. When in actuality, they work for the speaker, and the speaker is saying no. The speaker's saying no. And it happens. Routine, think about this, routine motions from the back mic. If you watch any of the sessions I've been in where I go back to make a routine motion, it's simple. The rules say I shall be recognized. It's another power grab that the speakership over decades has made to recognize some individuals and not recognize others for routine motions. Now there's privileged motions, like a call of the House and stuff like that. Routine motions should be recognized. Now, there's also decorum in the House. And I think sometimes that gets taken too far. What do I mean by decorum? If I were speaker, I think you recognize members that are doing routine motions that are respectful to the House. Now that's going to be subjective, right? What I mean by that is if people are just going up there to kill time and waste time and just literally just do nothing back there other than, if they're truly trying to make a motion to move something that I disagree with, you got to recognize them. They're representing their district. I think the rules are already pretty specific. It's no one holds the speaker accountable for it. Who can? Who in the Texas House gets to hold the speaker accountable? 149 members, right? So when I go to the front mic every day and I make the mistake of allowing the parliamentarians to tell me no, really the speaker told me no all day. And I should have turned to the speaker. I should say, you're really going to allow them to tell me no to go punish Democrats? Turning the mic off is one of the most disrespectful things that can happen, and I've had it done to me under Strauss. It's very, it's stressful, it's disrespectful, and I mean, we could do some additional rule changes, but I think it comes down to the mutual respect of the members. And look, let's be clear. The people that get the mic turned off and the people that aren't recognized for motions are never the people that are on the speaker's team that does what he tells them to do. It's people that have genuine questions and concerns. And to be honest, maybe they want to fight. But isn't that what the House floor is about? Is solving one another's differences and voting on something and informing one another of stuff? It's okay to fight. It's okay to fight on the House floor. I'm not talking punching. I'm talking about it's okay to fight. But that is used as a tool to shut people down. And I think it's disrespectful, dishonorable, and needs to stop.
Okay, let's talk about a specific action that the legislature should take to stop the sexualization of children. Let's talk about pornography, obscenity, smut, whatever you want to call it, in public school classrooms and libraries, in public libraries in cities and counties. Could you cite the number one action that the legislature should take to give parents and community members what they need to move forward to get this out of, well, let me just say it bluntly like this. It used to be that people said, if you want to live crazy and if you want to do awful, horrible, hideous things, you go do that on your own time and in the privacy of your own home, but leave the kids out of it. And it's no longer that. So Representative Tinderholt, what is the number one thing the legislature needs to do to move a barrier out of the way for the people of Texas?
There's a lot, but I'll tell you number one, and then I want to tell you others. If I were to think of one thing that they could do to stop individuals from trying to indoctrinate the children of Texas into these sexual behaviors and pornography, I would say accountability. We need to legislate accountability because we can't count on TEA to use their rulemaking authority to hold people accountable. So I would say number one is accountability. I'm talking punishment. I'm talking losing jobs. I'm talking about criminal behavior. How can we have a school, an elementary school, be considered a sexually oriented business? You can't. So when you do those things in a school, you should be held criminally liable. Because I'm going to be pushing for businesses that do that stuff to be held as a sexually oriented business. Now, I think there's more that can be done than just the accountability piece, the punishment, the crime. We can create those things. But how about standards? Standards and discipline. We'll talk about standards. And where we get books, and where we get these things, and how they're gotten. A lot of people don't understand how that happens. And they'll say, oh, we bought a bulk of books from our group, the organization we get them from, and they're approved through TEA, and that's where let's fix it. If that's what's happening, we can't just keep letting it happen and then fix it at the school level. Fix it at the TEA level. Fix it at the contract level. Fix it with the contractors and tell them if you sell these books to these schools, you will be held liable. You're accountable for bringing pornography into the school. You bought them, so you're held accountable. Your school district didn't review them, you're held accountable. Everyone across the line, because guess what? If we make things criminally liable and we hold people accountable, and everyone along the whole process knows they're going to be punished, I bet it stops really fast. I bet people spend the time and resources to stop this stuff from happening. And it's not just the books, right? It's some of the teachers. It's literally Alinsky's model, right? They're going to do things for a long period of time, and part of it is they're going to indoctrinate the children. And that's what they're doing. And it's horrific.
Okay, compare how a Tinderholt speakership would be different, if any, from a Phelan speakership in relation to the governor, especially when the governor pushes behind the scenes against implementing RPT, platform planks, and priorities. The big three are adept at playing the hide the conservative P from the grassroots. How would your speakership change the dynamic between the big three?
The governor won't meet with me right now because I fight him on stuff. He doesn't like it. And I'm okay with that. And it's okay to have a speaker that's not best friends with the governor. And I respect our governor. And I wanted people to vote for him in a general election. And I'm glad he won. But it's okay to have those three parts of government separate or unified. But I prefer separate, to be honest. I think that the House does their work, the Senate does their work, and the governor does his. And let's hope that all three of them are pushing the priorities. But I'll tell you what, I think Dan Patrick is going to push a whole lot of really good stuff across the line. And if there's a Speaker Tinderholt, I'm going to push a whole lot of really good stuff across the line. And I'm willing to bet that the governor will sign that stuff when it comes across his desk. Just because you're the governor, lieutenant governor, and the speaker doesn't mean that you get to dictate everything that happens in the world. So under Speaker Tinderholt, there would be no undue influence, disrespect, punishment. There wouldn't be the governor or the lieutenant governor trying to dictate what we will and will not do in the House. We will attempt to push the priorities of the RPT, and we will try to get them across the line on the Senate side and present them to the governor. Now, that doesn't mean that the governor's not going to maybe come to us and ask us to do some things that meet the criteria of the Republican Party. But the priorities of the Texas House, if I were the Speaker of the House. The priorities would have been created by other people and presented to us. There's 8 of them. There's a whole lot more than that needs to be done, but there's 8 of them. And in a world that I'm the Speaker, we influence people in a respectful manner, and we get those things across the line, and we present them to the Lieutenant Governor, who then presents them to the Governor. I don't believe that the 3 of those have to be best friends. I don't think the 3 of them always have to agree. That's what's gotten us into trouble sometimes, is too much agreeing amongst elected officials. I don't work for the governor. I don't work for the people in the Texas House. I don't work for the people in the Senate. Like I told you before, I got a couple 100,000 people that I'm responsible to. Hope that answered your question.
Okay, team. We have enough time for you to each ask one more question. So I think you ought to have about 2 left. Pick your most important question to ask, and then Mr. Tinderholt's going to get to try to close the deal once we're done. So,
All right, you actually have partially, maybe a little more than partially, actually answered my last question, but I would like to nuance it just a little bit. So in the 86th session, the Republican Party of Texas had 5 legislative priorities. We got none of those met in full. We had a few small bills, but nothing substantial. Last session in the 87th, we had 8 legislative priorities. We had 1 that we really considered was met in full with constitutional carry or permitless carry. Yet, many of our representatives came back to their districts and told us that it had been the most conservative session ever. I would like to know your assessment of the 87th session and how the 88th needs to be different and why. And why were we told it's the most conservative session ever?
Don't you want to come home and tell everyone that you had victory? I mean, honestly, as a human, as a person, you want to come home and tell everyone you had a lot of victory. Some of the people that are telling us that it was the most conservative session ever believe it. Some of them may not believe it, but they want to think that it was, right? Some conservative things happened. They did. Not to the level that I wanted or that you or the people in my district wanted, but some things happened. So if you do enough things and you do them part way, they're going to say it was the most conservative session ever. I disagree. I think that last session fell short on so many things. And really you can attribute it to leadership. I mean, honestly, it is. I'm not trying to slap him or be disrespectful to him, but all of the things that fell short, that could have made it literally the most conservative session ever, could have been done with influence, with speaker influence, instead of the speaker going to the Democrats to gain the speakership, beholden to the Democrats, has to give and take and barter with bills with your priorities, and then we don't really have a true representation of what the voters wanted down in Austin. And so, in short, we had some wins. It was not the most conservative session ever. And I'm going to have members of the Republican Party in that Texas House that are going to be mad with me saying it. I tell the truth according to my truth, and that's my truth. I don't feel like it was the most conservative session ever. We had some victories. I'm happy with some of the stuff that happened. But when we have a majority House, Senate, and we have the governor, there's no reason every one of them shouldn't have passed. Now, I'm a realist. Some of them may have been watered down for other reasons. So if you have 8, I want all 8 the way they are. But if you pass 8 and 6 of them are perfect and 2 of them somehow some stuff got on it and we have to fix it, I consider that pretty conservative, and that's a huge win. I want all 8, don't get me wrong. But to pass 1 and have some other victories, look, I mean, we had some pro-life stuff that was great. We really did. But we forget that we have a majority. This stuff should be easy. It really should. It should be easy. We should be unified. So, no, it wasn't the most conservative session ever while some good things happened.
Thank you for your time today, Representative. My last question is, thank you for your time today. My last question is, when, not if, we conservatives wrest control of the swamp that is the Texas House from the clutches of the lobbyist-funded establishment, we must ensure that the lasting changes are made that will forever keep power from being centralized in the Speaker again. Some of these changes would be the rules, some would be to the statute, some might even be constitutional amendments. Would you be willing to be the Speaker that relinquishes the massive power of the Speaker by increasing the authority and accountability of the representatives themselves and making the Texas House truly and fully transparent? And, and then a secondary question is, what further changes would you suggest that would ensure that future speakers are as weak as possible? So how do we make these changes
So let me answer
permanent?
the first one. Absolutely yes. And I think I've stated it over and over that I don't think it should be centralized with the Speaker. The Speaker is going to have influence, but I don't think the Speaker should be a dictator. Part of it, so we talk about rules and we talk about policies. What we're not also talking about is culture. The culture of that Capitol. Think about what you've heard and seen in that building and some of the things you asked me about alcohol. And we all know what's been going on in Texas at the Capitol. Part of it's cultural. Part of its rules, part of its historical precedent. The thing I pledge is that I will do everything in my sight that I can have any level of control over is to bring positive culture. We can enlist some of the rules. The place has to change. I'm not just talking about the speakership and the power of the speakership, okay? I'm talking about the members of the Texas House and how we conduct ourselves and what we do on a day-to-day basis and how we interact with our constituents and how we promise things and that we need to go down and exercise those promises by executing them. The short answer is yes. I can pledge to you that 100% I want to decentralize power. I want the power in the speakership's office to be pushed out to 149 members. I want the members to be making decisions. I want to push Republican priorities. I want to bring pride back to Texas, to our U.S. flag, to Christianity, to our education system, to our law enforcement and our district attorneys, and living in a state that is ruled by law and order, all of it. I think it's all super important and we're losing it, and someone needs to go to Austin and be in a position where it's decentralized and that it's not a dictatorship. Because look, I believe a lot of the Republicans there, they want to do good things. Surprisingly, a lot of them really want to. I know grassroots get frustrated. I'm down there. A lot of them really, really want to do good stuff. Fear and intimidation and centralized power is so detrimental to the process. It is. Some people want to please the people in Austin, and some people want to please the voters. Which one's right? Well, I know. I want to please the voters. Centralized power is such a harm to the process. Look what's happening in D.C. It's happening in Austin. It's bad.
Election integrity was the #1 vote getter on the March Republican primary ballot regarding those propositions, which I like to call that the best opinion poll you could possibly get for Republicans to know what the base thinks. So the base said in March of 2022 that that was the most important issue. Then we had the SREC, the convention, where the delegates and the SREC, of course, is supporting all the legislative priorities that the convention goers, the delegates, identified that as the #1 issue as well. So when you reflect upon what the voters said on the March primary ballot and what the convention goers have said, and you reflect on on the primary and on the general election, Mr. Tinderholt, could you identify 2 of the top things that the legislature needs to promise to deliver for the people of Texas during the 88th legislative session where election integrity is concerned?
I'm going to give you three. I'm going to one-up you. Number one is you've committed a felony if you've done anything that interferes with election integrity. It got taken out. I can't explain it. It is unfathomable that we passed that bill without it being a felony. There needs to be civil penalties. And our Attorney General needs to be able to hold people accountable and prosecute them when they do it. I was appalled that the Criminal Court of Appeals came out and said that he couldn't. I've got a couple of bills intended to fix that. But if we don't do, just at a minimum, if we don't do those three things, we will have failed not just our voters, the system, the process, and we will have failed that sacred thing that we have, the being able to go vote, that a lot of people in other countries can't do, that a lot of military members have shed blood and died and given their lives for. And so with that one topic, if we don't do it a minimum of those three things, we will have failed Texas.
Okay. I'm not sure I should ask this question, but I'm going to.
Do it anyway.
Is there any list of promises by Phelan that could cause you to drop out of the race? I'll give you some examples. No dim chairs, pledge to push and not knife behind the scenes all of the RPT, legislative priorities. A rule to place bills with majority co-authors on the House calendar. Or a pledge to push declared border invasion and legislation in support, etc.
No. And the reason that it's no is we will still have centralized power. And we will still have people that have fear and intimidation. And we have to remove that. So the answer is no. I'm not running on just the priorities. I'm not just running on transparent process. I'm running to try to change that culture that's festered for decades in the Texas House, that a lot of people are afraid to change. A lot of the members are afraid to change it. The answer is no. I'm running, and we're having a floor vote on the 10th of January.
Okay, Mr. Tinderholt, thank you for being here today, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes to close the deal with the folks that are watching or the folks who will be watching later, but we do appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm running to change the culture. I got 2 kids. I think if we don't do it now, we're going to get to a point where it's too far gone. Some would say it's already there. I have a mutual respect for my peers on the House floor. I want them to live a different life for the 5 months we're down there. I want them to vote for their district. The power that's been consolidated in the speakership isn't the fault of any one person. Going to the Democrats to try to get the speaker is not the fault of any one person. It happens over and over and over. It has to stop. We have to change the culture. We have to change the centralized power. We have to allow members to vote their district and really say it and mean it. We have to change a lot of rules. The Republican Party needs to hold people accountable for being Republicans. If I'm chosen to be the speaker, I will do my darndest to help the Republican members. When I say help them get reelected, I want to help them to follow the Republican priorities. I want to help people to try to make the right decisions on the floor if they have questions for me. If they don't, they're going to vote their district. I'm just so, been there 8 years, and I'm just so disappointed with the fear and intimidation that I feel pretty strong down in Austin. It even hits me sometimes in the gut where you're like, your friends are coming to you and asking you not to do something, even this. I would say that I'm not the most popular person in Texas today, certainly not in the Texas House by some of my peers. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm doing the right thing. I'm not following one of the planks, the rule. I think conservatives are going to try to use that rule to tell you why they voted against me. And I would say that today I hoped that I convinced you why that rule had good intentions and it's never been followed. And we need to overcome that. So I would ask you, all the people out there, to call your state reps and ask them, implore them to vote for the person they think is right, and I think it's me. I'm going to change the culture. We're going to change how the Texas House works and change Texas politics.
Thank you again, Mr. Tinderholt. I'd like to thank Jill Glover and Andy Hopper and Mr. Tom Glass for joining today. They traveled quite a distance to get here, but I appreciate, and I hope that the grassroots and the people that view this will be beneficial to them, because we've set forth some process issues here today, particularly for people who are new to the legislative process, that will help them understand it a little bit better, and maybe open the eyes of some of the legislators, the House members, that we certainly hope will view this and will hear your answers before they make their decision. Thank you.
Thank you.